The sky over Hawthorne was always a little too gray, like it had forgotten how to be anything else. The clouds hung low that afternoon, thick and unmoving, as if they were holding their breath. I remember staring out the car window, watching the trees bend with the wind, and feeling a cold knot twist in my stomach. I hadn't been back in years, not since our parents died. And yet, as the old Reyes house came into view at the end of the dirt road, it looked exactly the same. A sagging two-story structure, bones of rotting wood, and a roof like a hunched spine. The paint had long since peeled away, revealing the dark veins of time underneath. A single upstairs window was cracked open, the curtain behind it fluttering like someone was waving. But no one should have been home. Not yet. Elias was asleep in the passenger seat beside me, his head slumped awkwardly against the window, lips slightly parted. He hadn't said a word the entire trip. Not since they released him from the hospital. The doctors told me he fell, tumbled down the stairs in the dorms. But there was something in their eyes when they spoke. Something they weren't saying. And something in his eyes too, something hollow and afraid, like the fall had shaken something loose inside of him. I parked the car, stepped out, and stretched my back. The wind hit me immediately, sharp and biting, carrying the scent of moss and something metallic underneath. Blood, maybe. Or rust. I opened the passenger door, touched Elias gently on the shoulder. "We're here," I said. He opened his eyes slowly. Blank at first. Then something flickered behind them, recognition or memory, I couldn't tell. He nodded, stepped out without a word, and walked toward the house like he knew exactly where he was going. Like he'd never left. I followed him, carrying the 2 duffel bags. The porch creaked under our weight. I reached for the key hidden in the old stone frog by the door, same hiding spot Mom used when we were kids. My fingers found it instantly, as if nothing had changed. But when I slid the key into the lock, the door swung open on its own. I froze. So did Elias. "Wind," I whispered, though the air had gone still. The hallway inside was dark and dust-laced. I stepped in slowly, boots tapping against the floorboards. Elias stood behind me, quiet as ever, his breath soft and uneven. The place smelled like damp wood and old paper. Like time had gotten stuck here and was rotting slowly in the walls. "Feels like a grave," I muttered. Elias didn't answer. I flicked the light switch. Nothing. Of course. I pulled out my phone and used the flashlight. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper. The floral print faded into strange shapes that almost moved when the light touched them. A single painting still hung on the wall. Our family portrait from when I was 16 and Elias was 10. We were all smiling back then. God, we looked alive. We moved into the living room, and that's when I heard it. A soft scratching sound. Coming from the upstairs. I turned to Elias. "Did you hear that?" He nodded slowly. My chest tightened. Could be a squirrel. He looked at me, and for the first time in days he spoke. "No, it isn't." I didn't ask how he knew. I didn't want to. I just told him to sit while I checked it out, but he didn't move. He just stood there staring at the staircase, breathing slow and heavy. I took the steps one by one, the flashlight trembling in my hand. Each step creaked loud enough to wake the dead. The scratching continued, like nails dragging against wood. It was coming from the room at the end of the hall, our parents' old bedroom. I reached the door, heart thumping against my ribs. Slowly, I pushed it open. The room was dark, cold. The curtains were drawn, but the window was cracked open. The scratching had stopped. For a second, I thought I was alone. Then I saw it. On the wall, above the headboard, something had been etched into the plaster. A symbol. A jagged, looping mark that looked like it had been burned in with a hot blade. I didn't recognize it, but it made my skin crawl just looking at it. And below it, written in what looked like ash or soot, were 3 words. "He has returned." I stepped back slowly, the floor groaning beneath me. I didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath until it came out in a shudder. When I turned, Elias was standing in the hallway behind me. "How did you get up here so quietly?" I asked. He didn't answer. He was staring at the symbol. "You remember that, don't you?" I asked him. He nodded once. "I saw it in a dream," he whispered. "A dream. But something told me it wasn't a dream at all. Something told me that the house, this curse, had been waiting for us to come back. Not just for Elias. For both of us. And now it had us. I was lying in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The floorboards groaned beneath me like something, or someone, was shifting weight quietly back and forth. Elias had been asleep for hours, and I could hear his soft breathing from the room down the hall. But this sound, it was closer. more deliberate. Not the random scurry of vermin, but the long, slow drag of something sharp against wood. Scratched paws. Scratched paws. I sat up, heart tapping lightly in my chest. My phone showed 3:12 a.m. That time always bothered me, too late to be night, too early to be morning. A time when the world forgets you're still awake. Probably just mice, I whispered to myself, though I didn't believe it. I crept out of bed, careful not to let the old planks betray me. The sound had stopped, but my ears rang with tension. As I walked toward Elias's room, the cold draft returned, sharp and sudden, as if the house exhaled around me. I pushed open his door. The room was lit only by the weak spill of moonlight coming through the crooked blinds. Elias was sitting upright in bed, eyes open but blank, like he was watching something I couldn't see. "Elias?" I asked softly. He didn't blink, didn't even turn his head. His fingers were moving, slowly and methodically, against the edge of the nightstand. Scratch, scratch, scratch. My stomach dropped. I turned on the light. Elias didn't flinch at the sudden brightness. His fingernail was dragging across the surface of the table, carving something. I rushed to his side, gently pulling his hand away. Hey, what are you doing?" Still nothing. He looked at me as if I wasn't there, like he was staring through me. I shook him a little harder. "Elias, snap out of it." Then with a gasp, he blinked and began to tremble. Where am I?" he whispered, voice small and dry. "Why is my hand bleeding?" There were thin trails of red across his palm. I grabbed a tissue from my pocket and wrapped it around his fingers. "You were sleepwalking," I said, trying to stay calm. "You carved something on your nightstand. Do you remember what it was?" He looked over, and his lips parted. Etched into the wood was a crude, jagged symbol, something like a circle split by a line with tiny hooks at the end. It didn't look like anything I recognized. Not letters. Not art. It felt older. And wrong. I've never seen that before," he said. "I don't know why I did it. That was the first night I really felt it. That our home, our childhood sanctuary, was watching us. Breathing with us. And maybe, just maybe, it had its own plans." I got Elias back into bed and sat beside him until he drifted off again. But I couldn't sleep. Not that night. Instead, I wandered the hallways, flashlight in hand, checking walls, floors, and furniture. And that's when I found it. Underneath the hallway mirror, carved into the wood paneling, was the same symbol. Fainter. Older. It looked like it had been made decades ago. Covered in a layer of dust, but still clear enough to match the one Elias had drawn. That's when the whispering started. Not loud. Not even words at first. Just soft murmurs behind the walls, like breath filtering through the plaster. Then a single word. "Reyes. Our family name." Said in a voice that wasn't human. I froze. The air turned thick, and I suddenly remembered something from years ago. My grandmother, muttering to herself in Spanish, warning my father not to bring Elias back to this house. She called it una casa dormida, a sleeping house, and it had just started to wake up. I didn't sleep the rest of the night, and from that moment on, I began to suspect that my brother was not alone. The first time I heard the pages whisper, I thought I was losing sleep, not my mind. But when the floorboards creaked by themselves and Elias called out in a voice that wasn't his, I knew I had to find answers. And answers, as it turns out, were buried in the darkest part of our house. It started with the attic. It wasn't a place we ever visited as kids. My mother used to say, "There's nothing up there but dust and dead spiders," and for the most part we listened. But something about the way the air felt thick lately, like it carried more than just heat, drew me upward. I climbed the narrow pull-down ladder late one evening, flashlight in hand, the house already steeped in that unnatural silence that only seemed to settle after Elias had fallen asleep. Or at least, after whatever wore Elias had stopped pretending to be him. The attic smelled like mildew and old smoke. Cobwebs hung like curtains, brushing against my cheeks as I stepped over boxes of broken toys and rotting books. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for until I saw it. An old chest, blackened with age, sat in the corner like it had been waiting for me. I had to kick it twice before the rusted latch gave way. The lid creaked open with a sound like a groan. Inside, nestled between yellowing linens and moth-eaten scarves, was a book, small, leather-bound, and stained with something that looked like dried blood. The cover bore no title, but the spine had a name burned into it. R. D. Reyes. My grandfather, Roberto Davis Reyes. My mother never spoke of him except to say, he was a scholar until he wasn't. She left it at that. I remember him only in flashes, a tall, gaunt man who used to stare out windows longer than was polite. He died in this house. Alone. Found clutching a crucifix in one hand and a knife in the other. I took the journal to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. The first page was harmless enough, a note in his messy handwriting. If you find this, I pray you read it with courage, not curiosity. The second page chilled me. It lives in us. Not like a parasite. Not like a ghost. Like a seed. It waits for the broken ones, the wounded souls. And it blooms in boys. I turned the pages slowly. At first, it read like the ramblings of a madman. Half sentences, prayers in Latin, strange sketches of eyes with no pupils. But then came the dates. Names. Patterns. My uncle Daniel. Died by hanging, age 17. My cousin Mateo. Disappeared without a trace. Last seen near this house. My own father, overdose, but the journal claimed otherwise. Each entry mentioned the same presence. Davis. The demon. Not the man. I read one passage out loud. Davis is not a name, it is a mask. A name passed through us like a sickness. I was the first to bind it. I was the first to fail. Suddenly, Elias screamed from the other room. I bolted out of bed, the journal slipping from my lap. My feet slammed against the cold wood floor as I rushed to him. He sat upright in bed, eyes wide, his lips moving soundlessly. Sweat soaked his shirt, but he wasn't awake. Not really. His head turned toward me slowly, too slowly. And then he whispered, "You found it." I didn't move. "You shouldn't have read his words," he said in a voice not his own. My knees buckled. The journal lay open in the hallway behind me, and for a second, I swear I saw the ink on the pages moving, shifting like it was alive. Elias blinked once and collapsed back onto the bed, breathing evenly. I stood there in the dark for a long time, trying to tell myself it was just a dream, that my mind was fragile and grief was making it worse. But I knew better. Something had taken root in my family, and now it was growing in my brother. And I was next. I heard the knock just after midnight. Not the kind of knock you expect from a visitor. Not soft or hesitant. This one was slow, steady, and deliberate, like each strike of knuckle against wood was meant to test my nerves. I stood frozen in the kitchen, one hand gripping the handle of the rusted teapot I never used, the other clenched at my side. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. It wasn't Elias. He was upstairs, drugged into a forced sleep after last night's outburst, when he'd scratched lines into the hallway walls and screamed at something I couldn't see. I walked slowly to the front door, every step echoing louder than it should have in the old house. The hallway light flickered above me, like it had been holding its breath all day and finally let go. I opened the door just a crack. A man stood there, tall and lean, dressed in a black coat that looked like it had never been dry for more than a day. His eyes were sunken, as if sleep had abandoned him long ago. A deep scar ran along the side of his cheek, slicing his face in a clean line from temple to jaw. "Alfonso Reyes?" His voice was calm, too calm. I nodded. "You're Murrin?" He gave a single nod, then looked past me and into the dark hallway behind. "You were right to call." He didn't wait for me to step aside. He just walked in like he belonged there, or like something in him did. The house groaned when the door shut behind him. I led him into the living room, though I hadn't really cleaned. Books were scattered across the couch, most of them dealing with demons, hauntings, and symbols I still couldn't make sense of. The coffee table was covered in old family photos, half-burned candles, and a bowl of melted wax that had once been an attempt at a ritual I found online. Murrin didn't comment. He just sat down slowly in the armchair near the fireplace, his hands folding neatly over his lap. He looked around the room with the careful gaze of someone looking for a trap that hadn't been sprung yet. "Where is the boy?" "Upstairs." He sedated. "Had another episode." "And before that?" he asked, voice low. I hesitated. He spoke in a voice that wasn't his. It sounded older. Not angry. Just cold. Like it didn't care if we lived or died. Murrin nodded. "That's usually when they start talking. Not to scare you, but to make you listen." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden cross, worn and cracked at the edges. He held it loosely, like a man who had once believed in its power, but now just hoped. "I'll perform a blessing. Just a simple one. If he reacts, we'll know." I stopped him. "Wait. There's something else," I said, stepping toward the old dresser drawer where I'd hidden the journal. "My grandfather, he wrote about this. He knew something. A name, Davis. It's all over the pages." Murrin's eyes darkened the moment I said the name. He looked like he'd just swallowed something sharp. You found the name already, he whispered. Then we're late. We climbed the stairs in silence, our steps muffled by the old carpet and the growing tension. Outside, wind brushed the house like something looking for a way in, or maybe a way out. Elias lay in bed, breathing shallowly. His eyes were closed, but his hands twitched now and then, like he was dreaming of something violent. The scratch marks on his arms were fresh. He'd done it again. Murren stepped closer, pulling out a small bottle of holy water and murmuring something under his breath. I recognized none of it. The words didn't sound Latin. They sounded older. He dipped his fingers into the water and flicked a few drops toward Elias. What happened next froze me to the floor. Elias's eyes snapped open, and they were not his eyes. They were too dark, too knowing, and filled with something cruel. Murren kept chanting, louder now, as Elias sat up in bed without using his hands, his body lifting like a puppet. "Stop," Elias whispered. But it wasn't his voice. It was deeper, layered, like more than one thing was speaking at once. Murren didn't stop. Elias smiled. That slow, eerie grin I'd seen only once before. "You think I'm the first? I'm not. I'm just the door you noticed." Murren stepped back. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked afraid. "He wasn't the first," Murren muttered, more to himself than to me. "Oh God, he wasn't the first." Elias turned his head toward me. "Alfonso," he said, using my name like a knife. "Tell him what your mother said the night she died. Tell him what you saw under her bed." I felt all the warmth drain from my body. He couldn't know that. Nobody could. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Then Elias collapsed. Limp, unconscious. Just a boy again. Murren and I stood outside the room, shaken. "I've only seen this once before," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "And that boy didn't make it." "You said he wasn't the first," I whispered. Murren looked at me with eyes that seemed much older now. "No," he said quietly. "He's not. And I don't think you are either." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid of Elias, but because I was afraid he might be right. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the voices. Not because Elias had carved a jagged eye into the hallway wall using his fingernail. No. I couldn't sleep because of what the Exorcist said right before he ran out the front door, blood trickling from his nose. He wasn't the first. Those words haunted me more than the creaking footsteps in the attic or the soft laughter I sometimes heard behind the bathroom mirror. I found him the next morning, slumped on a pew at the edge of the burned-out chapel near the edge of town. Father Murren, or what was left of him. His collar was gone. His face was pale. His hands trembled as if holding something invisible that wouldn't let go. I approached slowly, afraid that if I spoke too loud, I'd shatter whatever thin veil of sanity he was holding onto. "You said he wasn't the first," I murmured, sitting beside him on the cold wood. "What did you mean?" He didn't look at me, just stared at the charred crucifix nailed to the blackened wall. "Tell me." His voice cracked like dry bark. "You think it started with your brother?" "No. This thing, it's old. It's clever. And it's been in your bloodline for a long time, Alfonso." A cold feeling spread through my chest. "My grandfather?" I asked, heart thudding. "Is that why he locked himself in the cellar the year before he died?" "Not just your grandfather," Murren said, finally turning to me. His eyes looked older than before, sunken and tired. "Your great-uncle David. Your father's cousin Tomas. Even your father, to a degree. They were all hosts. Vessels. Each one used like a tool, then discarded when they were no longer useful." I shook my head, almost laughing. "That's not possible. My father died in a car accident. He wasn't possessed." Murren looked away, silent for a beat too long. "He wasn't," I repeated, this time with less certainty. "The demon doesn't always show itself in dramatic ways," he whispered. "Sometimes it lives in quiet madness, whispering into thoughts, twisting love into fear. Possession isn't always spinning heads and Latin curses. Sometimes it's slow corrosion, like rust on the soul." I swallowed hard, trying to process what I was hearing. The past began to rearrange itself in my memory. My father's sudden rage episodes. His obsession with locking the attic door. The way he spoke to himself late at night. "What does it want?" I asked. "Why us?" Murren's lips thinned into a grim line. "It wants permanence. Not chaos. Not destruction. Just to stay. Your bloodline has something that allows it to linger. A connection. Your ancestor Davis Reyes made a pact, something dark, something binding. He gave it permission. And now it keeps passing from one male host to another." I stood up, fists clenched. "Then we'll end it. We exorcise it. Burn it. Do whatever it takes to get rid of it." You don't understand, Murren said, almost pleading. It's not just in Elias. It's in the house. The land. Your name. The wind howled outside, scattering ash through the broken stained glass. Murren looked small beneath the rising light of dawn. I can't go back there, he said softly. It touched me. It knows me now. Then help me, I said. Tell me how to kill it. Murren's gaze flicked to mine. You can't kill it. But maybe, just maybe you can trap it. Bind it. Seal it away. But you'll need to find where it began. My mind flashed to the sealed door in the basement. The one my grandfather warned me never to open. You said Elias wasn't the first, I said, walking toward the chapel exit. Then I'll make sure he's the last. Behind me, Father Murren bowed his head and whispered something I couldn't hear. I didn't need to. I already felt the truth curling in my spine. This wasn't about saving my brother anymore. This was about breaking a curse written in our bones. And to do that, I'd have to face the one who started it all. The first host. Davis. They say if you dig too deep into your bloodline, you might not like what you find. I didn't believe that, until the night I opened the dusty, iron-bound trunk hidden beneath the floorboards of our attic. It started with a dream. Not a nightmare, not quite. I saw Elias standing by our old family well, whispering names into the dark. Names I'd never heard before: Sebastian, Mateo, Lucas. When I woke up, the words were still echoing in my ears, clinging to the back of my throat like smoke. That morning, I tore through the attic like a man possessed. I didn't know what I was looking for, only that I had to find something, anything, that could explain what was happening to my brother. Why his eyes didn't look like his anymore. Why he smiled like someone else was pulling the strings from inside his skin. That's when I found it. The trunk was buried beneath a rotten corner of the attic floor, sealed with rusted chains and thick layers of dust. The air around it was colder. Still, as if the house itself was holding its breath. My fingers trembled as I broke the old lock with a crowbar. Inside, there were boxes of letters, leather-bound journals wrapped in cloth, black and white photographs with cracked edges and scratched-out faces. And one thing more, a family tree, drawn in ink so faded it was almost invisible. Someone had gone to great effort to cross out certain names. Not erase them, obliterate them. Like they didn't deserve to exist. The same names from my dream were there, too. Sebastian Reyes. Mateo Reyes. Lucas Reyes. Each name ended the same way. Died under unknown circumstances. I kept reading. There were newspaper clippings folded into the journals, yellowed and brittle. Local boy found hanged in barn. Man claims brother spoke in foreign tongue before disappearing. Priest refuses to speak on possession rumors. All the deaths were men. All between the ages of 15 and 30. All from our bloodline. At the center of it all was one name that hadn't been crossed out. Davis Reyes. The ink used for his name was darker than the rest, like someone had retraced it over and over. There was no death date beside it, just a question mark. I sat back, heart thudding against my ribs like a drum. Elias was 15. My brother was next. I shouldn't have opened that last journal. The leather felt warm to the touch. Wrong, somehow like skin that had forgotten it was dead. The writing inside was neat at first, academic even. Davis had been a theologian, a historian of faith and fire. But the entries grew darker with each page. He spoke of voices between the walls, and a guest without a face. Of rituals passed down in secret, prayers twisted into spells, and one phrase that kept repeating. The blood must carry it. The host must obey. The house must remember. I read until my vision blurred. I read until my hands shook too badly to turn another page. And then something moved behind me. A whisper, not from Elias, not from the house, but from inside my own mind. You shouldn't have come looking, Alfonso. I slammed the trunk shut and backed away, heart pounding like it was trying to break free of my chest. All my life, our family never talked about the past. We spoke of the dead like they were asleep in another room. Now I knew why. We weren't cursed. We were chosen. Chosen to carry something unspeakable, generation after generation, until it found the host strong enough to stay forever. And I had a sickening feeling it wasn't Elias the demon truly wanted. It was me. The line hadn't ended. It was just waiting. Waiting for me to uncover the truth. Waiting for me to take my place. I woke up to the sound of humming. Not a normal hum. This one was slow, dragging, almost like someone forcing a lullaby through gritted teeth. It slithered down the hallway and into my room, wrapping around my chest like a cold rope. For a moment, I lay still, afraid that if I moved, the sound would notice me. Then I realized, It was coming from Elias's room. I threw off the blanket and grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand. The house was darker than usual, like the shadows had grown roots and decided to stay. As I crept down the hall, the old floorboards didn't creak. That scared me more than if they had. I stopped outside his door. The humming stopped. I pushed it open slowly. Elias was sitting upright on his bed, hands in his lap, facing the window. The moonlight spilled across his face, and for a second, I thought he looked older. Not just tired, ancient. Like time had stretched across his bones. "Elias?" I whispered. He didn't turn. I stepped closer. "Are you okay?" That's when he spoke, without looking at me. "You buried the dog behind the shed. You thought no one knew." I froze. "What did you say?" He turned then. Slowly. His eyes met mine. But they weren't Elias's eyes. His were always warm, curious. A little nervous around people, but always gentle. What stared back at me now was something else, deep, black, like a tunnel. Not empty, no. Worse. Filled with something hiding. "Grandpa told you not to climb the silo," Elias, or the thing inside him, said. "But you did. And you lied about it. Remember how you cried when you thought he'd fall?" I couldn't speak. No one knew that story. No one. I was 7. Grandpa had caught me at the top of the silo. He didn't yell. He just looked so disappointed. And later that night, I begged him not to tell Mom. I never told Elias. Never. I stumbled back a step. "You're scared of the basement," the voice said. "You always were. You used to count the steps when you went down. And if you ever missed one, you'd run up crying, thinking something would grab your ankle." My throat tightened. "Stop it," I whispered. "That's not you." He smiled. It wasn't a human smile. It stretched too wide, too calm, like someone remembering a joke that ended in blood. "I've been many things," he said softly. "But never your brother." I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But I stood there, frozen in the weight of those words. He tilted his head. "You really don't understand what this is, do you?" "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, placing his hands on the windowsill. "Your brother was always fragile. But you're different. You keep digging, asking, looking. That's how we find the next one." "We?" He turned slowly again, eyes like oil in a pool of water. "Davis was the first to invite us in. Your blood remembers him, even if your mind doesn't." "No." "Oh yes." The voice was barely above a whisper now. "And if you keep going, Alfonso, if you keep playing hero, you'll open the door so wide, there won't be a house left to save." I backed away, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Elias, or whatever was behind his eyes, sighed and laid back down like none of it had happened. The moonlight faded, swallowed by clouds, and the room went completely dark. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the kitchen, staring at the hallway, listening for that humming to start again. And I realized something I hadn't let myself believe until now. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a possession. It was an inheritance. And it wanted me next. I should have left the house the moment I found the journal. I should have taken Elias and never looked back. But some places don't let you leave until they've finished what they started. The hallway to the basement was colder than the rest of the house. Not just cold, wrong. The kind of chill that sank into your bones like it belonged there. I held my flashlight tight and pushed open the rotting door at the end of the hall. Dust swirled in the beam of light, catching like ash in the air. I had passed this door 100 times growing up. I never gave it much thought. Just a sealed-off pantry, I assumed. But after rereading the journal, my grandfather's feverish entries about the sealed heart of Davis, I knew better. The journal mentioned a room built underground. Hidden. Bricked off by the family once they realized what Davis had done down there. Whatever he was summoning, whatever he brought into our bloodline, it started there. My hands trembled as I peeled back the faded wallpaper. And there it was, barely visible beneath layers of dust and time, a thin crack in the wall, running like a scar. I pressed on it. It gave way with a sound like bones snapping. Behind it was a hidden door. My heart thundered. I pulled it open. The stench hit first. Earthy, moldy, but also coppery. Like old blood. I gagged, pulling my shirt up over my nose, and stepped inside. The room wasn't big. Just enough space to crouch and breathe in horror. The floor was covered in blackened ash. Bones, some small and some terrifyingly human-sized, were arranged in circles. Symbols were carved into the walls, deep, erratic, and still glistening in spots where they hadn't dried right. Like someone had carved them not long ago. The worst part was the center. A stone slab stood there like an altar. Heavy, stained dark. Chains were bolted to the floor beside it. My light flickered as I moved closer. That's when I saw it, etched into the stone. From flesh to flesh, may the host never die. I staggered back. My grandfather hadn't been exaggerating. Davis Reyes hadn't just invited a demon in, he'd built a temple for it. He had chained people here, performed rituals, sacrifices, and he hadn't just done it for power. No, he did it for continuation. I remembered something Father Murrin had said. He wasn't the first. I thought he meant Elias wasn't the first to be possessed. But now I understood. Davis was the first. He had found a way to survive, through us. Through every male born of his blood. Every son, every brother, every me. The flashlight flickered again and cut out. I stood in darkness. Somewhere behind me something moved. It was slow, dragging like a body being pulled across stone. I didn't breathe. I didn't turn. I couldn't. Then I heard it. Alfonso. A voice that was not my brother's. A voice that was not alive. I turned, and the beam snapped back on just long enough to show a shadow crawling across the far wall. Not cast by me. Not by anything I could see. It slithered across the bricks, head bent, arms long and wrong. I backed away and stepped onto something brittle. A jawbone cracked beneath my boot. The shadow stopped. The room was a memory, an echo, and I had awakened it. I ran. I didn't look back. The journal slipped from my hand and hit the stone floor with a sickening slap, but I didn't stop. Because I knew what it wanted. It wasn't Elias anymore. It was me. The next host. The final host. And now it was waiting. I shouldn't have opened that book. Even now, my hands tremble at the memory of its weight. Heavy not just in mass, but in history. It wasn't bound in leather, not exactly. The cover felt too soft, too warm. Like stretched skin dried under the sun. When I turned the first page, the lights in the basement flickered, and for a split second, I swore I heard someone whisper my name from the walls. Alfonso. I stood in Davis Reyes's ritual chamber, hidden beneath our home, like a secret tumor. The air down there didn't move. It pressed against my lungs, thick with dust and something worse, something ancient. I had found the hidden room by accident. Or maybe it found me. Elias had drawn another symbol in his sleep. I recognized it from the old journal I found, etched next to the phrase, "The mouth below waits." I tore open the basement floor, following the grooves in the stone until I uncovered a rusted iron ring. Beneath it, a trapdoor groaned open, revealing the stairs that led me here. The chamber was circular. The walls were stone, but not cold. They pulsed, faintly like veins under skin. Candles and bone holders lined the edges, long burned out, but still smelling of wax and rot. In the center of the room was the book. No dust. No decay. As if it had been opened just yesterday. Its pages weren't written in ink. They were scrawled in something dark, sticky, and faded blood, I assumed. It felt wrong to touch it, but I did, because curiosity has teeth. The first few pages were ramblings. Words in Latin. Symbols I didn't understand. But then came drawings, men with empty eyes, mouths stitched shut, and a beast hovering behind them, always watching. One of the illustrations was labeled The Binding. That's when I read the line that made my skin crawl. To never die, he invited the darkness to dine. His sons would carry the meal. His blood the offering. His soul eternal. Davis Reyes. My ancestor hadn't been cursed. He asked for this. He welcomed it. He carved his chest open and begged the demon to fill the hole where his heart once beat. It wasn't just Elias. It wasn't just me. It was all of us. Every Reyes man, marked, hunted, used. We weren't victims. We were vessels. Hosts. And Davis? He never left. He lived on in fragments. Every time the demon moved from one of us to the next, a piece of Davis remained. Memories. Instincts. Hunger. Like a rot that spreads but never dies. That's why Elias sometimes spoke like someone else. Why he knew things I never told him. He wasn't possessed by a stranger. He was possessed by family. There was a page near the back, stiff, almost brittle, drawn in far more detail than the others. It showed a ritual, one that could sever the chain. But the final step chilled me. The blood must betray its own. A sacrifice. A willing one. I stared at the crude drawing of a man with arms wide open, standing in fire, smiling. Behind him, shadows screamed as they were pulled back into the earth. And I realized the truth. This wasn't about saving Elias anymore. It was about ending Davis. Ending all of it. But it meant one of us had to die. And I knew who it had to be. The house groaned above me, like it heard the decision being made. The candle flames quivered, then steadied. I closed the book, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt calm, because now I knew what I had to do. I was ready to bleed for it, ready to end the line, even if it meant going to hell with him. The rain hadn't stopped for hours. It drummed on the roof like frantic fingers tapping a warning, but I was too far gone to care. My clothes were damp, my hands dirty. I sat in the center of the living room with pages of my grandfather's journal scattered around me like broken glass. Each word burned deeper than the last. Every time I blinked, I saw Elias's eyes, those eyes that weren't his anymore. They stared through me now. I hadn't slept in 2 nights. My mind spun with symbols, ancient phrases, and fragments of prayers that didn't belong to any religion I recognized. The house groaned around me as if it, too, was slowly realizing the truth. This thing inside my brother wasn't just some passing demon. It was a legacy, a bloodline infestation. It had worn our faces for generations. And now it wanted mine. That's when the knock came. 3 slow taps. I stood, heart pounding, already knowing who it was. When I opened the door, Father Murrin looked like he'd crawled out of a grave. His coat was soaked. A deep gash stretched across his cheek. He stepped inside like a dying man returning home. "He's almost gone," I said, barely recognizing my own voice. Murrin dropped his satchel on the floor. "Then this is our last chance." I helped him sit by the fire, which barely flickered in the hearth. He reached into his bag and pulled out a rusted tin box. Inside was a folded cloth stiff with dried blood, and beneath it, a thin, black book with no title. "Davis wrote this?" I asked. "No," he whispered. "The demon did." I couldn't look away from it. The pages shimmered slightly, as if alive. Murrin turned to a marked passage, his hand trembling. "This is the ritual. It's ancient, older than language. One host must bind the demon willingly, then die before it can leap. That's the only way to end it." "So you're saying I have to trap it inside me?" Murrin nodded. "You or Elias. But Elias is too far gone. And I'm not of the bloodline. The chain won't break unless the blood dies with the host." I stared into the fire, the flames reflected in Murrin's eyes. My stomach turned. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I was hoping there was another way." He wiped his face with a sleeve. "There's not." I stood up, my mind reeling. Images flashed through me. Elias, 8 years old, chasing fireflies behind the barn. Elias laughing with milk in his nose. Elias crying when Mom died, asking if angels had wings like dragons. I couldn't let him vanish into that thing. Not Elias. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. "What happens if I fail?" I asked. Murrin's silence said everything. Then he pulled a long silver knife from his coat and handed it to me. "You'll need this when it's time." That night, I prepared the basement. I drew the sigils from memory, lines, hooks, circles, and surrounded the room with mirrors. I spilled salt across every doorway. The house seemed to fight me with every step. Lights flickered. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. The smell of ash lingered in every corner. And then, just after midnight, Elias came to me. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He just walked down the stairs with eyes black as coal and a smile too wide for his face. "Little brother," he said in a voice that cracked like dry wood. "Finally ready to become a man?" I didn't answer. I let him step into the circle. The sigils flared red. I held the knife tight. The ritual had begun. And so had the end. It started with a scream, short, sharp, and not human. I was in the kitchen, hunched over Father Murrin's torn-up notes, trying to decipher a phrase in Latin when the sound pierced through the silence. It came from outside, slicing through the thick night like a blade through flesh. I dropped the paper, heart hammering, and ran to the back door. The wind had picked up again, howling low and hollow, the way it did only in Hawthorne. "Elias?" I called out. No answer. I searched the house first. His bed was empty, sheets thrown aside like he'd gotten up in a hurry. The front door was wide open, and muddy footprints led out into the night, toward the woods. My stomach turned. Not the woods. I grabbed a flashlight and the iron crucifix Murrin had left behind. It was cracked at the base from the last time Elias touched it, but I still held it tight. As I stepped outside, the cold hit me like a wall. The moon was nowhere to be seen. Clouds hung low and heavy, like the sky had forgotten how to breathe. Every branch creaked. Every tree leaned too far. The deeper I walked into the forest, the more the darkness felt alive. I could smell something rotten in the air. And then I saw them. Animals. Scattered in the brush. A fox, its throat ripped open. A deer, split from chest to belly. Their eyes stared at me, wide and frozen, mouths twisted in permanent screams. None of them were eaten, just torn apart. Something was killing for sport. I kept moving, flashlight beam shaking. I whispered prayers, half remembered and broken. My breath fogged in front of me, but not behind. That's when I heard laughter. Not a child's laughter. Not my brother's. This laugh was wrong, slow and rattling, like it came from lungs filled with dust. I followed it to the old clearing, where we used to build forts as kids. The one with the broken statue of St. Jude half buried in vines. And there he was, Elias, standing in the middle of the clearing, barefoot, in nothing but a shirt and shorts. His hands were covered in blood. His eyes reflected the flashlight beam, but didn't blink. He smiled at me. Not my brother's smile. Too wide. Too sharp. Elias, I whispered. Come back with me. You're too late, Alfonso, he said, voice echoing like it came from a cave behind his teeth. Something inside me twisted. That's not your voice. The thing wearing my brother tilted its head. He's still here watching, listening, crying, but he can't come to the surface anymore. I stepped forward, raising the crucifix. The thing hissed, lips curling. Still playing holy man? Murren died screaming. Did he tell you what he saw right before the end? I said nothing. Me, the demon said. Not Elias. Not Davis. Me. It stepped closer. The woods seemed to pulse around us. I felt the earth breathing. Why us? I asked. Why my family? Because Davis asked for eternity, it said simply. And I gave it to him. One body at a time. Your blood is my temple. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. My hand was shaking so bad I dropped the crucifix. The thing chuckled. He made a deal. You live the debt. You'll have to kill me first. Oh no, it said, stepping into the flashlight's beam. You're not the sacrifice. You're the final host. I backed away. But the forest shifted behind me, branches closing in, roots slithering like snakes. You'll say yes eventually, Alfonso. Because when the time comes and you beg me to save him, you'll give me your name. The light flickered and went out. And in the dark, I heard my brother's voice cry out, raw, real, and terrified. Alfonso, help me. Then silence. Not even the wind dared to move. The house was no longer a house. It breathed. The walls pulsed with something alive beneath them, like veins filled with smoke and heat. I stepped through the hallway, floorboards groaning under my weight, but they weren't just wood anymore. They whispered. Soft, slurred words. A voice I was starting to recognize as my own, distorted and drawn into something unholy. My fingers trembled around the book, the black leather journal left behind by Davis. His final notes weren't ink. They were written in something thicker, darker, with a scent I didn't want to identify. I had read the last ritual 3 times. Each time, it made less sense but burned deeper into my skull. The last line still echoed in my ears. Only blood can trap what blood invited. I was the last. I understood now. Elias had only been a vessel, a waiting room. A distraction. The demon Davis had always been coming for me. The basement door creaked open by itself. I didn't ask how. I knew the house was guiding me. It wanted me to come down. It needed me to. The air changed the moment I stepped onto the stairs. Each breath felt like it was taken underwater. The candlelight flickered, even though I carried no candle. Shadows danced ahead of me, crawling over the stone walls of the ritual chamber. They weren't cast by me. They moved like they had minds of their own. I reached the bottom and saw the altar. It was still there, just as I had uncovered it days before. A stone slab with dried blood crusted into its grooves, symbols carved deep into its face. Bones lined the room in a careful circle, bones of animals, maybe even people. I didn't want to know. I only knew one thing. This was where it would end. I placed the book on the altar and opened it to the marked page. The language made no sense to my eyes, but my mouth spoke it anyway. The words rolled out of me like I'd known them forever, like I had been practicing for this moment my whole life. As I chanted, the room shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. The walls cried out, yes, actually cried like 100 mouths gasping in pain. And then I heard him. Davis. His voice didn't come from the room. It came from inside me. You're late, Alfonso. My head jerked back, and a pain stabbed through my spine. I dropped to my knees, clutching my stomach. Something was moving inside me. Not physically, not like in the movies. This was deeper. Like my soul was being scraped raw. You were always the one. Elias was weak. But you're just like me. I screamed back. Not with words, but with the ritual. I kept chanting. My voice broke. My throat bled. But I didn't stop. The fire lit itself. Blue flames curled around the altar, wrapping it like a serpent. They didn't burn me. Not yet. The book trembled, then burst into ashes. Davis laughed. The sound filled the entire chamber. It wasn't loud, it was thick. It settled into my ears like wax, warm and slow and choking. You think you can trap me? I am you. No, I whispered. You're just the rot I refused to pass on. Then I picked up the blade. It was ceremonial, ancient, rusted at the edges. I had found it buried with the book, hidden in the crawlspace behind the fireplace. It belonged to Davis once. Now it belonged to me. I placed it against my chest. I looked at the wall, at the faded photograph of my family still hanging, half-burned. My mother holding baby Elias. Me standing behind them, with my hand raised awkwardly. I stared at that boy, frozen in time. And I smiled. For Elias. I drove the blade in. Pain exploded like lightning. My knees buckled. The fire surged. The walls screamed again, louder this time. I fell forward onto the altar, blood spilling across the sigils. Then came the silence. Not peace. Just stillness. I felt him try to crawl out, clawing at the inside of my skull, scraping his name into my bones. But the blood held him. My blood. My choice. The fire swallowed the walls. As the flames closed around me, I looked up. And for a moment, I saw a boy at the top of the stairs. Elias. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He just stared down at me, eyes wide and glassy. And I smiled again. Because he looked free. Then everything turned black. The house felt different that night. Not just haunted, but alive. Breathing. Watching. Every wooden plank beneath my boots groaned like it remembered pain. The wind outside had gone still, but inside, the air swirled like it was being pulled towards something ancient and angry. I stepped into the basement with the leather-bound book in one hand and a knife in the other. The same knife I found buried in the old altar, the blade stained black with old blood that would never come clean. My breath came in cold puffs. Not from fear, at least not only fear, but something colder. A chill that crawled under my skin like icy fingers. The sigils on the walls glowed faintly now, reacting to my presence. I felt them like heat on my face, though they gave off no warmth. Elias was upstairs, asleep, or pretending to be. Either way, this was something I had to do alone. The book shook in my hand. Not from my grip, but on its own. The pages turned slowly, stopping at the one marked with my grandfather's dried blood. The ritual to bind. The ritual to end the host. I lit the last candle and stepped into the circle. Davis, I whispered, I know you're listening. The flames danced higher. Shadows twisted across the walls like they were waking up from a long nap. I didn't need to wait long. A voice echoed around me, deep and smooth like oil dripping in a quiet room. You came after all, it said. So noble. So foolish. My mouth was dry. I swallowed hard. I'm not here to save myself. I'm here to stop you. The laugh that followed wasn't loud. It was soft, like a whisper behind my ear. But it made my skin crawl. You are not the first to try, the voice said. But you are the first to understand. You see now, don't you? I never needed Elias. I only needed time. You were always mine, Alfonso. I felt it then, pressure in my chest, in my head. My eyes watered. Blood ran from my nose. I stood tall anyway. Not anymore, I said. And I plunged the knife into my palm. Blood hit the stone floor, and the sigils blazed to life, red and violent. The wind roared up from the center of the circle. Books flew from shelves. The candle flames turned black. Pain tore through my body, but I didn't stop. I chanted the words from the book, old, ugly words that didn't belong in any tongue I knew. My voice trembled. My knees shook. But I kept going. And then I saw him. Davis. Not just a voice now, but a shape. A man in a priest's robe, but his face was my father's. And my grandfather's. And mine. You can't escape me, he snarled. No, I whispered. But I can take you with me. I grabbed the burning sigil and pressed it to my chest. Flames raced up my arms, but I didn't feel fire, I felt light. Pure and sharp. It cut through every whisper, every lie, every part of him in me. He screamed. Loud and real this time. The basement cracked. Walls buckled. Dust rained down from the ceiling. But I held firm. I could see Elias in my mind, his smile before all this began, the way he clung to my shirt when he was afraid of thunder. He deserved peace. He deserved to be free. So I walked into the center of the circle, where the fire burned hottest, and I opened my arms. Let it end with me, I said. And then, silence. Nothing. No pain. No fear. Just stillness. Like a door had finally closed. Forever. They found the house weeks later. Burnt down to stone and ash. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Only one thing left untouched. A photograph. Me and Elias on the porch. Smiling. And the sigil, burned into the ground, still glowing faintly red. I don't know where I am now. But I know Davis is with me. And I'm not letting go. I should be dead. That was the only thought that made sense as I opened my eyes in the ashes of the house. Everything around me was gray. The walls were scorched. The floor beneath me cracked and brittle. The air was thick with smoke and silence. There were no screams. No whispers. Just stillness. But I was still breathing. Somehow. My hands were burned, the skin blackened in places. I could barely move my fingers. Every inch of me ached like I'd been torn apart and sewn back together wrong. But I was alive. And that terrified me. I had spoken the final words. I had offered myself as the vessel. I had looked into Elias's eyes, those not Elias eyes, and I had let the demon inside me. I had felt it. I had felt Davis's presence coiling around my ribs, clawing at my throat, laughing through my own teeth. So why was I still here? I rose slowly, feet crunching over the broken glass and burnt wood of what used to be our living room. The portrait of our family, once hanging crooked on the wall, now lay melted on the ground. Our mother's face had bubbled away in the heat. Elias's smile was untouched. Mine was gone. Outside, the sun had started to rise. A low fog clung to the grass like something afraid to let go. I stepped onto the porch, barefoot, bleeding. The birds were singing like they always did in Hawthorne, like nothing had happened, like they hadn't seen what I'd seen. And then I saw him, Elias, sitting on the swing, feet dragging lazily through the dirt. His head was down, and for a moment I felt hope. Maybe the ritual had worked. Maybe he was just sleeping, healing. Elias, I said, my voice raw and broken. He didn't answer. I walked closer. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the earth didn't want me to get too near. My shadow stretched long over the porch, reaching him before I could. He looked up. His eyes were brown again. Soft. Familiar. My brother's eyes. Alfonso, he asked, his voice small. Is it really you? Tears flooded my eyes. I dropped to my knees in front of him and held his face in my shaking hands. He didn't flinch. He just looked at me. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I tried to stop it. I gave everything. I know, he said. I saw. I pulled him into me, and he cried like a child, like the boy he should have been all along. We stayed there for what felt like hours, surrounded by the bones of our ruined house and the distant echoes of something ancient and hateful. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. But peace doesn't last in stories like ours. That night, I heard him talking in his sleep. I leaned into the doorway, quietly, not wanting to wake him. He mumbled something over and over. I listened. It was a name. Davis. 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 My stomach twisted. I stepped into the room, slowly, carefully. Elias? I whispered. He rolled over. His face was calm. But on the wall behind him, drawn in ash with a child's careless finger, was a symbol I'd seen before. The first one he ever carved. A spiral with a cross. I stood there for a long time, cold creeping into my bones. Maybe I had been the final host. Maybe the ritual had burned Davis out of me. Maybe. But as I looked at my brother, his chest rising and falling, the shadow of the sigil behind him, I felt something watching me. Not from the room. From inside. It wasn't over. It never was. And I think Davis is still watching. Through Elias. Or maybe, through me. After all, we share the same blood.